Welcome, everyone. A good afternoon to our viewers in Germany and a good morning to our viewers in the United States. My name is Steve Sokol. I'm the president of the American Council on Germany, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to the 15th edition of our virtual series, State to State German-American Legislator Dialogue. This series brings together state legislators from Germany and the United States to talk about some of the most pressing issues at the state and local level. We're pleased to be partnering with the Aspen Institute Germany on this very important initiative, which elevates voices from the state level. And today, we're going to focus on the topic of social cohesion. And as we were in the green room just a few minutes ago, we were talking about the different definitions of social cohesion. And I, for one, am very much looking forward to hearing from our speakers and how they approach this challenge. Because many of us tend to think about social cohesion as sort of the glue that holds democratic societies together. And when people feel connected with one another and work to achieve common goals, democratic institutions can gain in resilience, but also in legitimacy. Right now, we're all operating in a climate of uncertainty, political polarization, and so the strengthening of social cohesion is not just desirable, but I think one could argue it's essential for safeguarding democracy. We've seen some democratic backsliding. We've seen how social cohesion has weakened. And so particularly at the state and local level, what some of our legislators are doing to try to rebuild that. Communities in both the United States and Germany are navigating a complex environment where social divisions and the deepening of political polarization and inequality are growing. In this context, state governments in both countries play a pivotal role. Their proximity to local communities and a better understanding of the issues that they face equips subnational legislators with the means to effectively address the decline of social cohesion with policies that reflecting local values and local priorities. And to build trust in democratic institutions and practices, leaders at the subnational level have the responsibility to produce policies that nurture social ties and community engagement. So with that, it's a great pleasure to hand the virtual mic over to Stormy Miltner. She's the Executive Director of Aspen, Germany, and she will introduce our speakers and moderate today's discussion. With that, Stormy, over to you.
Thank you so much, Steve. And I didn't want to interrupt you because we lost your video already a couple of seconds ago. But there you are again.
I'm back. I don't know exactly what happened. Sorry about that. The voice just continuing on.
Absolutely. Loud and clear and very precise, as always. It's a pleasure to cooperate with you and the American Council on Germany on this, as you said, very important initiative, but also very important topics. We believe that it's really important to get or give local stakeholders a greater voice in our discussions, especially when the Berlin-Washington or Brussels-Washington connection might be a little bit rougher than or be undergoing some readjustments, to say it diplomatically, but also because a lot of policies come from the state level or from the local level. We all know that states can be the laboratories of democracy. They can be a testing ground for new initiatives. And we always said that in a positive way, laboratories of democracies in a positive way. But that's not always the case. Sometimes also some problems emerge from the state and local levels. Sometimes also mistakes are done on the state and local level. We can learn from each other, from the good cases, and we can also learn from each other to avoid repeating the bad cases. And this is what this initiative is all about, bringing together stakeholders from both sides of the Atlantic and from the local level to learn from each other and to elevate the voices to the transatlantic debate. And it is a really great pleasure introducing our panelists today who joined us in this virtual room. It would have been more lovely to have you here on site in Berlin, but that would have been difficult to fly you over. But it's a great pleasure to introduce from this side of the Atlantic Tom Brüntrup to you. And we are going to post all of our speakers' CVs also in a second on our in our chat. So Tom is a member of the Parliament of Nordrhein-Westfalen. So everybody who wants to also learn a little bit German, this is how your state is pronounced in German, North Rhine-Westphalia in English. And Tom, you are a representative of the CDU. And you are not a newcomer to politics, but you're a pretty young politician, right? So when did you join the legislature?
I became a legislator of the North Rhine-Westphalian Parliament in 2022, but been in the city council of my hometown, Bielefeld, since 2020.
Ha. And you still like it?
Yes, I love it. But without correcting you, I'm looking also on the world map. I'm on this side of the Atlantic, but right now I'm in Tokyo in Japan, participating today's meeting.
All right, so you are in a very different part. We're not going to talk about Japan today, although that also would have been interesting to hear the definition of social cohesion from a Japanese point of view. But thank you so much, Tom, for joining us from Japan. It's also a great pleasure to introduce Simone Strohmeier to you. She is a member of the Parliament of Bayern, Bavaria, for the SPD. And Simone, when did you join the legislature?
Oh God, I started to be a member of the parliament in Bavaria. I think it's 24 years ago. It was 2003. So it's quite a long time.
Yeah, and since you're still there, you really must love it.
Yeah, I do. I still find it's very interesting, and time has changed a lot, and so it's always something new.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And you're joining from your hometown, or are you also somewhere in the world?
Yeah, I'm staying here in Bavaria, and it's cold and dark and not very nice right now.
Oh, this is a perfect lead over to Representative Lydia Glaze, who is joining us from a state where it's not cold and dark and gloomy, but beautiful fall weather, Indian summer from Georgia, member of the Georgia House of Representatives. Lydia, thank you so much for joining us.
It is my pleasure to be with you this morning and my colleagues from the Transatlantic German and American Council. Thank you. Georgia is beautiful. It's a cool breeze, but it's beautiful, sunny. It's all colors on our trees, and it's a nice, crisp fall day. I began state politics in I ran in 22 and I took office in 2023 and 24. I started in 2013 in local government in the city of Fairburn, Georgia. So I have moved from local to state, and it has been my pleasure to serve in both local government and state government.
Thank you so much for joining us. When we bring together state legislators from both sides of the Atlantic, I feel it's always good to just explain a little bit how your work looks like. Because sometimes it's a full-time job, and sometimes you also have a job on another job which you need to do. So Lydia, could you explain to us in Georgia, is it a full-time job, or how is being a legislator structured?
Well, it is structured that the Georgia legislature is in session 40 days, which usually starts the second week in January and goes to the first week in April. During that time, all legislation is passed for the state and the state budget. And if there is an amendment for the prior budget, we do all of that within that time frame. However, you go back to your respective districts, and then you do what we call the local work of continuing to serve your constituents. So even though we say it's part-time, It's the part-time that you're away from your home and you're actually making laws, but you continue to serve on a full-time basis. I'm a retired educator, so I do work full-time every day inside of state politics.
Well, thank you so much for explaining that to us. And Simone and Tom, you're both full-time legislators.
Right.
Yeah, we have 3 days a week in Munich Parliament or committees, and the other 2 days that's reserved for our local work. There's also a lot to do.
I think we should add the 2 days on weekend because as a
Yeah,
politician,
that's true.
there are no holidays, no weekends, working 7 days a week because we also need to represent a lot of volunteers who mostly work or make things possible on the weekend. Yes.
No, thank you so much. And Tom, your district, is it rural or is it urban? How would you describe it? Or semi-urban?
So the most people would say it's semi-urban. We have around 340,000 inhabitants. But I think for our region, Ostwestfalen-Lippe, which is part of North Rhine-Westphalia, it's the biggest city. So I would call it urban.
You would call it urban. My husband comes from that district, and it is known for the most stubborn people in Germany. And I can say that is so true. Simone, how is your district?
I like the word semi-urban. I'm close to the third biggest town in Bavaria. It's called Augsburg. It's about 60 kilometers from Munich. But there's a lot of rural areas too. So semi-urban is wonderful description.
Oh, and it's so good because then when we talk about social cohesion, we can also bring in the connection between cities and more rural communities. So Lydia, and your district, how does it look like?
I'm half and half. I sit about almost an hour outside of urban Atlanta. I am what they call suburban, which is just families. The communities are suburban housing and schools, but I have half and half. So I have what they would also call rural. And so I love it because I have two types of constituents in my district, which gives me a little bit of stretching to ensure that I connect with both sides. They also are politically divided and different on opposite sides, which is good for me and good for them as we work to continue building social cohesion. So it's a good district to build that type of cohesion that we're going to be talking about today.
Well, thank you so much also for the perfect lead over to my next question to the three of you. I would like to learn a little bit about what you are currently working on and which committees you are and how that relates to the issue of social cohesion. And Lydia, maybe I can stay with you. Tell us a little bit about your committee work and your local work.
As a former educator, I sit on K through 12 education, higher education, and I'm also on appropriations and information and audits. So everything that relates to students and education from preschool all the way through college, PhD is the work that I'm actually involved in on a day-to-day basis. And now that I'm out of session, we also have special committees, and I sit on a special committee that we're working on drafting new legislation around absenteeism. Since the COVID, the American public education has been dealing with a major issue of absenteeism. And so we call it chronic absenteeism when students miss more than 10% of their 180 days in school. So that's kind of what we're working on. I'm working around trying to find out how we can put our students back in the seats so that we're not having learning loss and learning difficulty.
Thank you very much. What I also should have mentioned, we, as always, want to bring in our audience. So you, the participants. So get ready. Either you can write in the chat or you can also raise your hand, but I will involve you a little bit later on. Simone, tell us a little bit about your work on social cohesion matters.
Yeah, I'm in the Committee of Education too. We do all stuff of education from preschool to higher education. And right now we have a big discussion about educational equity because we have a lot of families with migration backgrounds or migration or families from not academic families. And one of the problems here in Bavaria is we have a very good schools, but one of the problems is that kids from non-academic families or families with migration backgrounds have don't. It's not so easy for them to go to higher schools. And this is one of the topics we are talking right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we come back to this, when we will talk about the challenges to social cohesion and a lack of social mobility or impediments thereof. That's a big, big topic. So we keep that in mind. And Tom, what are you currently working on? Which committees are you in?
So I'm in 3 committees. The first committee, which is less influenced by social cohesion, I think, is the science committee. Of course, we make sure that science is free and also that every student has a possibility in Germany and to study without paying any studies payment or study fees. And that's why I think it's not the biggest part in social cohesion. But I think in family, kid, and youth, we are just discussing the new law regulating childcare, which is especially important for families where both parents have to work and have to have the possibility to give their child to the childcare, making sure it's getting education, it's getting care, and there while the parents are able to work. And the third committee is the committee for building, housing, and living, which of course belongs also to the topics of social housing, but especially the question how we can make building cheaper again, so everybody or more people are able to build their own house, or making us able to build more houses with given money.
Yeah, because there is this shortage in living quarters or living space all over Germany, but also in the cities. Cities are growing, which is a good thing, but the number of apartments or houses is not growing in equal number. And in addition, it just is also becoming increasingly expensive. So thank you so much for raising so many pertinent topics: education, health, housing, living costs or costs of living. And this brings us to the issue of what are we talking about actually when we mean social cohesion? And Steve already teasered this in his introduction, and he said for him, it's the glue which holds our societies together in a time where we might see more centrifugal powers leading us to drift more apart than together. So Lydia, what is social cohesion for you? How would you define it in a nutshell?
In a nutshell, it's our shared trust in government. It's our included input and engagement in our own government. And it is also mutual responsibility. on both sides, so government and those who are governed. We are both responsible for having a more perfect union where there's inclusivity, equality, and equity in every part of our society. And when the trust erodes, cohesion erodes. And when cohesion erodes, then our society's future is at stake, and certainly the democratic process.
Oh, thank you so much. This was really very, very rich. Shared trust in government, civic engagement, and also the space and ability to engage and shared responsibility, working towards the joint goal of equitable societies, fair societies. And looking at this, I mean, it's a high benchmark. Where would you say we currently stand, Lydia?
I think there's a lot of work to do. We have rolled back a lot of our great policies at the federal level in the US. And so the work over the last 60 years is being eroded. And that is a great concern and should be not just for Americans, but throughout the global planet. We have been leaders in moving along the federal lines of inclusivity. And I am afraid that we are no longer the model right now. And so I would hope that what we have done in prior years is still stands in the hearts and minds of our German brothers and sisters, because it was better and will continue to work back towards those goals that we achieved previously.
No, thank you so much. I think, Lydia, on this side of the Atlantic, we also have big challenges, maybe also different challenges. But what you mentioned with regard to COVID, for example, there's still, I mean, many parts of society which are still struggling also here with the repercussions of COVID. Simone, how would you already have your pen in hand, so you were diligently already formulating, I think. How would you define social cohesion, and where do you think do we currently stand on our side of the Atlantic?
Yeah, I think social cohesion is one of the biggest challenges in our time. I already told I'm 25, nearly 25 years now in politics, and I think social cohesion is gotten worse in this time. We are living in times of political polarization, in times where inequality is growing. For example, in Germany, we are facing major challenges such as inflation. Everything is getting more expensive. Many people have fear that they can't pay their bills. Economic slowdown, what we are not used to. Migration and the effort of integration and the insecurities of the war nearby. And I think as a result of all these uncertainties, the polarization is there are two groups of people: the people which have a lot of fear, and the other ones who has a lot of hope that everything will get better. But I think it's really one of the biggest challenges to bind people together again and let them feel that only together things can be done.
Thank you so much. And over to you, Tom.
Yes, so for me, before laboratories of democracy, I always thought social cohesion is mostly about having the same values, helping each other, feeling togetherness. And because we have been asking what's the difference between urban and suburban, I always thought it would be much more easier in the suburban because we have smaller towns, people better know each other, are more likely to help each other, more likely than in the urban areas. But I think we have the same problems also in the suburban areas, which why it was important for me to discuss with the group, which means social cohesion. And I think a lot of parts are or have been mentioned. It's of course about civic and political participation, but especially it's about social inclusion and social mobility. So about the question, what can I reach in my life? Do I have the same starting conditions? What do I need to live a lucky life? What do I want for my family? And in the moment where somebody feels less possible to do so, he will not be longer part of the society, feeling the same values because he sees differences between the people who are able to buy a new car, to build a house or something like this. And I think it's important for us to make this take it in the focus of politics, as that especially social mobility is responsible for the social changes. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for also mentioning the important parts of social cohesion being social inclusion, social mobility, but also the feeling that you are included in a society and the feeling of not being left behind. And just for our audience, if you're wondering what Tom was referring to when he said laboratories of democracy, this was one of the projects we've been running over the last 5 years, where we brought together state legislators from both sides of the Atlantic. And Tom and Simone were in our last cohort on social cohesion. And we also have another of our participants in the audience, Stephanie Chung from Michigan, also a state legislator. So we have also somebody from Michigan joining us today. So we, Lydia, you mentioned trust in government and also civic engagement. When you look at your district, would you say this people engage automatically, or what does it take for people to engage?
Well, both sides. There is a constant interaction to get people to engage. People will get to the polls and they will vote. And so I have high participation of voting on both sides. But voting is not the end all for civic engagement. It is prior to voting to have your voice lifted up for policy input, so that we're actually getting policy to the floor to vote it up, so that everybody can have an opportunity to give input before we vote on what things matter and how laws will change. For instance, in Georgia, one male constituent last year engaged me in men's health around prostate cancer. That bill was then formulated after several community events and collecting data and state data on men's health. We found out that there was a problem with men's prostate health, and that we lose 11% of our men who get prostate cancer in Georgia. And we should not be losing any, because we have the medical prowessness and stability in this state to eradicate the deaths around prostate cancer. So if you don't engage them prior to voting, you will miss the opportunity to engage on the immediate effects of what's affecting your constituents. And so I think there is a give and take on our side as politicians. We must go to them, our constituents, sit in their meetings, have our own meetings, invite them in, and then put policies or engagement opportunities for them to give us policy ideas, so that we can make it better and then have the opportunity for it to be voted into law during the legislative session.
Yeah, let's stay a little bit with the issue of civic engagement, ability, and also space. And before I hand over to Simone and Tom again, I would like to bring it back to the issue of also trust and polarization. So, Lydia, how do you do it if some of your constituents do not trust government anymore? And you also mentioned that you do have very different, so to say, poles in your district. So how do you bring everybody to the table?
Well, the main foundation is around education. And when you show that you have care for everybody's fundamental right of education and access to social mobility, you have the ear of your constituents. So it's first building trust from you to your constituents and caring about what matters to them most. And that's showing up where they live and where they work and where their faith is played out every day. And then inviting their engagement back to you on those particular issues. So I'm there when it's a wedding, I'm there when it's a funeral, I'm there when it's fun and it's a fair, and I'm there when there's educational opportunities and milestones. And so that builds trust day to day. And so when the big issues come, there's an opportunity to sit in the room and to give them voice to their concerns, and then leave those same rooms to build out what we know is policy.
Thank you so much. Simone, you already unmuted yourself, so that's a sign for me that you are coming in.
Yeah, I want to tell a little bit about our laboratories of democracy. I already told that I'm strongly committed to educational equity. And I was very, very happy that we have developed a few recommendations in our laboratories of democracy, which focus on education. And I think especially in the issue of civic and political participation, education is very important. And we have one recommendation where we want to implement democracy-focused learning programs starting in early childhood education. And this was a very important recommendation for me because I want to tell a little story. I was a few days ago in a kindergarten in my district. It's a kindergarten managed by my welfare association. It's the workers' welfare called AVO, and here we have a democratic learning program where the children in this kindergarten, they vote every day what kind of toys they want to have in the room, what kind of food they want to eat the next day. And I think these are small decisions, but I think it's so important to learn what democracy is, that you have to, that you are part of it, and that you can at least change things if you are part of you. And I think we should really try to bring such kind of education, democratic education programs into our kindergartens. I think this was really good recommendation we developed here together. Stormy?
Thank you. This was perfect. Now we have already a few recommendations on the table, how to overcome polarization, how to deal with mistrust. And thank you so much, Simone, sharing this concrete example. Over to Tom.
Yeah, thank you. I think the biggest parts having education is is important for the starting conditions for every kid and every person in our society to have the same possibilities to study, to get a job, and everything else. The next part is, of course, learning how important democracy is for us, for ourselves, but also for our society. And the third part, without me wanting to bring a negative touch in it, but I think learning how important democracy is and learning how democracy function, it's also about learning about the difficulties of democracy, so that there's always not a loser, but it's not always one winning or making being successful. For example, kindergarten, I want this toy, and the next one next to me wants another toy, and we decide, okay, we choose none of these toys, but choose a third one. So making the people understand that politics and democracy also always means it's a compromise that we have to do. And I think that's especially important discussing about negative headlines in the newspapers about the polarization of the society. It always starts with a misunderstanding that somebody would like to have done something but was unable to, and we are unable to discuss why he was unable to do so because of financial situations or something like this. But we owe them for not fulfilling their promises. And that's why it's important to also show the negative, it's not the negative touch, but the difficulties of democracy.
Yeah, that's such a good point, that it becomes harder and harder to make compromises also within the legislative process, because you want to fulfill what your constituents want, but if you have an increasing polarization, it becomes more difficult to make those compromises. How do you deal with this, Lydia? How do you work across the aisle?
Well, we are in an election right now, and we have a referendum, and we had to weigh providing more money into education or allowing our seniors 65 and above to continue to have rising costs for education while not using the education system and yet being on a flat tiered income. And so we just balanced that, and we had bipartisan, bicameral support. And so most of the counties in Georgia are giving seniors tax support by exempting a portion of their education tax. And so we get to vote in a couple of weeks. We were able to put it on as a referendum. And I think when you're selecting and having those choices, you must hear from both sides, and you must try to get to where you can help and not harm. And so I believe that's what we've done, that we are helping because we have higher assessments. So our educational systems will get more money, but at the same time, we'll give our seniors some tax relief because they don't utilize the system and they've been paying in for decades, and we're giving relief there.
No, thank you so much. So when Germans look to the United States, we mostly look at Washington, D.C., with all the issues taking place, the government shutdown, the party politics, and so on. So Lydia, on the state level, bipartisan legislation is still possible?
It is very much possible because we're so close to the people and we hear their needs and we see it every day. And so my colleagues on the other side wrote the legislation. We have more votes on our side in our county, and we led the higher number of votes for it. But we were both in favor of giving seniors some exemption from this school tax because they needed it to sustain their lives. And we have given more money to our local schools because we assessed housing at a higher percentage. And so we believe we hit a happy medium, and we stood together, bipartisan work.
This is fantastic. And Simone and Tom, bipartisan legislation, is that a thing in Germany? Who wants to go first?
Tom.
I don't know if so. For me, Stormy, maybe you explain the word. What does it mean? Yes.
Yeah, this means that two parties on the different, so to say, side of the spectrum
Yeah.
are proposing a legislation together and then going for it. So
Yes.
let's say CDU and SPD, although you might not be in a joint government coalition together, still doing joint proposals?
Yes. So we are together with the Greens in North Rhine-Westphalia, which is, from my point of view, pretty opposite side. So normally the CDU stands for something conservative, staying on the known technologies, and the Greens always wanted to change to green energy and something like this. I think it's also one of the questions which were made in the F&A. And I think we are calmly walking together, which is pretty important to not be driven by the headlines or the situation in the society, being able to show that our solutions maybe not work on the first day, but after years. And that's why we were also able, as conservatives and Greens, to build a lot of green energy, to find compromises along our way, also in difficult topics, because we make sure that we discuss our problems with each other behind closed doors. I think it was a little bit different in the last federal government in Germany, where a lot of topics were discussed in the social media, in newspapers, or something like this. But if we want to gain trust in the society, we have to do our work and show the people the solutions always, also when they take time.
Yeah.
Come on.
Can I add something? You asked how we deal with, at least with compromises. And I want to say that for me, it was a good lesson in democracy was our little experiment laboratories of democracy. But because sometimes we were very close together and sometimes we were very far away in our discussions. And at least it was good that we tried really hard to find a compromise. And for me, this was really a good learning lesson, because I think it's in our times, it's so important to stay in dialogue with other democratic parties and try really hard to find a compromise, no matter what. And this was really a good learning lesson to do this with the Aspen Institute. And after we found these compromises, I think it was really a good feeling for us, because we all saw that we are not so far away from each other. And I think democracy is finding compromises.
Thank you so much. And with this, I really want to open it up for our for our participants. And Mike Watson has already written twice in the chat, and I would like to bring Mike in. I also want to invite Steve in the end of our discussion today. Maybe you can also tell us a little bit about the social cohesion tours which the American Council on Germany is organizing, because they are also absolutely fantastic. But before we come to this, can I bring you in, Mike, or should I just say what you wrote in the chat function? But we also would love to hear your voice. Just giving a few seconds to unmute Mike. Okay, so then I'm going to bring in Steve in a second as well, but I still want to bring in what Mike wrote in the chat function, because I think it's a really important point, or two actually. So on one hand, he wrote about the issue of disinformation and how we are dealing with the disinformation. The other point he mentioned was how we are dealing with migration in our respective states. And both of them are also linked to each other, because there's a lot of disinformation about migration. So Lydia, maybe you can kick us off, and then Tom and Simone come in. And also, Mike brought in the issue of so to say, green social cohesion and energy issues. But we come to this after the first big topic of disinformation and migration. Lydia.
So disinformation is definitely an issue, and misinformation. And so your research teams are extremely important, and having factual data and not just taking headlines and making them part of your decision-making process. And so research, I think, is the most important now, to fact check everything. Don't even whatever you get on AI, whatever you see on social media, and then whatever you get from your constituents. And so that part is important. And we do have an Office of Research in the state government. So all of us can use it no matter what party you're in. So we're getting the same factual data that helps us make decisions. You and I know that if you start off with the wrong premise, you're going to end up at the wrong decision. And so I think to end up having good governance is to start with factual data. And your constituents need to know that you're not one who's going to be moved by emotional headlines, but that you will stick with the facts, and then you will help them understand what the data is, what it points to, and then how your legislation will involve and include demonstrated data and research.
Thank you so much. This is really helpful. Let me play just briefly devil advocate. Lydia, what are you saying if somebody tells you your fact might be another person's disinformation? How do you react if somebody says, who is an expert? What is a fact?
Experts are just that. That means they've been in the field. They have knowledge, deep knowledge, and they've been trained in that deep knowledge. And so that's, first of all, the education must be there, the time must be there, and the research on their work has to be out there. So that's number one. If we agree on that, then usually you're going to get to where there is some opportunity to agree on certain facts. And once the facts are out there, whether you stay on a vote together or you differ, at least people will know what the facts are. And that's what is most important, is to not have laws disseminate out of what we know is misinformation. And so I want to go back to one thing you talked about. What does that look like with immigration? And so even though it doesn't seem like we have a major migration, but in the entire United States, we have major immigration. Some of it is come through legal and some has not followed the legal process. And so right now in Georgia, a lot of workers in the ag area, which is agriculture, which is number one economy in our state, we have grave concerns that that economy has been affected and will continue to be affected because of immigration policy at the federal level. And so workforce development has been hit and will continue to suffer some setbacks as a result of major immigration policies and the enforcement that we are utilizing at this time.
Thank you so much. And also being so very clear and countering my little devil advocate attack. Thank you so much, Lydia. And over to Simone.
Yeah, for me, it's again the most important thing, education. I think we have to bring more media competence to the people, and to young people, to old people, to everyone. And this is the hard thing, because I think on our schools we have some programs, media competence programs, and we do a lot there, but how can we bring it to older people? And here I think we have to we have to try new things. We have to bring the media competence to the companies, to clubs, to the volunteers, to everyone. That everyone can, how you said, Olivia, fact check, do the fact check before he believes something. It's a big thing, but we have to start it.
Tom.
Yes, so of course education is a big part, as well as for the politicians as for the people. So if you would have been asking me the questions a few months ago, I would have said that politicians used to be informed correctly, but because Home Party, we were able to see that talking about the election of a judge goes to the summer holidays. Also, politicians from my party were close to the headlines, closer than to the informations. And I think one topic is, of course, research, education, but I think we also have to talk about regulation, because we have a big problem with the social media platforms, where a lot of people and also known companies, bots, and something else are producing disinformations. And since no person alone is able to filter these informations to make clear what's correct and what's disinformations, but it's directly is played out to the people in front of the phone on TikTok, on Instagram, and other social media platforms, it's becoming a big problem for us. That's why I think we have to talk about regulation on the social media platforms, as well as education with the people and the politics. And also we have to make the media more independent again. Independent, not because I think in Germany the newspaper would be depend on some party or something like this, but they need to get the clicks. So the headlines will always be more risky, more polarizing than it used to be in times where the newspaper was bought on the way to work or home. So that's why it makes the media more independent from the social media clicks that they are trying to generate.
And one big thing I want to add, Stormy, I think for me it's very important to protect people under 18. I really think we should think about how we can do this for social media. I think that's really a hard thing, but I think we should think about certification procedures with a passport for younger people, that they are protected. that's the things we have to think about. I think it's not an easy thing,
Yeah.
but
No, this is great. Thank you so much. I think all what you said makes a lot of sense. People need to be media literate, social media literate, to identify more what is disinformation, what isn't, or information manipulation or misinformation. But at the same time, it's not just an issue of being literate. It is also an issue of algorithms. It's also an issue how the mechanisms work, and so on. So it does, I agree, Tom. Also, it's an issue of regulation and working with the big social media platforms. We had a project a few years ago with school kids from both sides of the Atlantic, on disinformation, misinformation, and media literacy. There was, I think, 4 years ago, and they were aged 14 to 18. And they recommended a driving license for social media usage, analog to the bike riding test you take in elementary school. Lydia, you might not know this, but here it's a lot of times that kids in elementary school, grade school, take a little traffic test before they are, so to say, let on the road with their little bikes. And our school kids participating in that project back then already recommended doing such a driver's license for social media usage. So I found that courageous, and I thought, do you really want this? And they said, yeah. All right, so I bring in Steve, who wanted to bring in a comment and a question, but then we come also back to the issue of energy and greening. So Steve, come on in. I already see that you are unmuted. I hope that there's no technical problem. All right. So as long as we can't have you on screen again, I want to bring us to another issue. There you are. All right. So,
Okay. But I was going to say, take the greening question first, because my question goes in maybe a different direction and could be a good closing question, perhaps.
all right. Then we do the greening first. Also, Mike brought in the issue of energy, and energy has so many, I mean, touches upon so many aspects of social cohesion, right? I mean, we talk about energy prices, we talk about access to energy, but we also talk about climate change related or weather phenomenon related issues like heat in inner cities. And probably Lydia in Atlanta, that is an issue which hits mostly, I mean, the poorer parts of the city often harder than other parts. But we also talk about that we want to protect the climate. That might be more costly than utilizing more fossil fuels. So it seems that there are some conflicts of goals and interest around. Lydia, how is this topic discussed in your district? Energy prices, and social cohesion.
Well, I'll tell you, in Georgia, data centers are now becoming fastly a part of communities, whether you're in rural or suburban. And so, what that is doing, and the issues behind it, is driving the price of energy up, and it's overloading the grid, and it's taking clean water and high uses of energy. And then the backup generators are flying in the face of energy sustainability. So going back to possibly in using coal, maybe versus solar or wind. And so we are right now in a dead heat of more people in Georgia being concerned about electricity pricing, water and sewer pricing, and then just the grid being able to sustain the needs of community, as well as the new data centers that are being brought online. And so it's right now we're in the throes of having that one from one community to the next One side of my community is actually voting in data centers, and a lot of them, and the other side is standing firm against where they will be placed, if they'll be placed in their communities, and holding fast to how they can make it more sustainable and less frequent data centers moving into and taking up large swaths of land that really could have been used for growing food and making sure that we have a good food supply. So it is really a major issue here and certainly in my district. But I believe it's a major issue throughout Georgia.
Thank you so much for raising that issue. I think we are not, we actually haven't grasped yet the challenges around this. Everybody wants to have, I mean, great data and data centers and safety and security of your data. And everybody loves AI, makes everything so much faster. But in the end, it also takes a lot of energy. I mean, we see that data centers, there's a preference to building data centers also closer to the cities and not just like in very, very rural areas where the energy is actually produced, wind and solar. And that creates lots of problems, as Lydia pointed out, water, energy, pricing, heat, and so on. So lots of new conflicts coming up. Over to Simone and Tom, and then to Steve.
Yeah,
Simone first.
Same question or?
Yes, on the issue of
energy. I remember we had hard discussions about the prices of renewable energy during our last government. It was the SPD and the Greens. They wanted to bring renewable energy into the houses and to ban the classic energy. And we had really big discussions about that. And a lot of people had a lot of fear that they can't pay the renewable energy. And this was really a big discussion. And I think we learned from this that we can't change systems too fast. We have to do it step by step. Otherwise, a lot of people have fear and they get in panic, and it's not a good thing.
So structural change needs to be managed so that nobody is left behind. Yeah, because then we are again in this vicious cycle. If people are feeling left behind, it's going to feed into this mistrust and polarization, which we are currently observing. Over to Tom.
Yes, I totally agree with Simone. When I read the question of Mike first, I thought, okay, green energy and social cohesion, of course, thinking about future and climate change. Of course, green energy is the one and only technology we should focus on. But of course, discussing about how to heat up my house, my water. It's been a tough discussion in Germany because every house would have needed to implement a new heating system around 30,000 euros, especially discussable in old houses where you need also new technology in bringing the heat through the house. And for me in Ostwestfalen-Lippe, the district of North Rhine-Westphalia, it's especially a big topic because we are now investing a lot of money in wind power. So just in North Rhine-Westphalia, in the 5 years, 2022 to 2027, we tried to build 1,000 windmills addition to what we have right now. And the question is always where to build it. It's always in the suburban areas where the people are living together, where people, of course, discuss, should this windmill be built next to my house or in my view out of my garden, out of my window, wherever you want. And what is with the people living in the urban areas, so they don't get any windmills? Maybe they use solar power. Looking at the percentages, it's very low. So in Bielefeld, in the city, in the urban area, we have 4% of the roofs with solar power, while a lot of cities in the suburban region of Bielefeld have about 10, 20, 50 windmills. And that's why it's always a social discussion about renewable energies, where to build them, and who will pay the costs of it.
Thank you so much for rounding us off, and over to Steve.
Thanks. A huge thanks to all of you. This has been such a rich and thoughtful and thought-provoking conversation. Stormy invited me to say a few words about ACG's work on social cohesion, and let me just keep it very brief. For a number of years, we've run study tours that focus on social cohesion with experts from the state and local level who are addressing these issues in their communities. But as recently as Friday, we did an event in Houston, Texas, as part of our Foreign Correspondent Unplugged series, where I moderated a discussion with two journalists, one German and one American, about the challenge of social cohesion in Germany and the United States. And so I invite you all to track that down. It should go live later this week. But what I wanted to maybe do is ask a closing question of each of you, which is, we've covered a wide range of topics. You've addressed disinformation, you've addressed structural change, you've addressed some of the challenges. I want to bring it maybe back to the starting point, which is, it would be wonderful to hear from each of you how you are trying to rebuild trust in your communities when it comes to social cohesion. Because I think that that's kind of the cornerstone of so much of what we're talking about, whether it's dealing with disinformation, whether it's dealing with structural change. The fabric of society is changing in our communities on both sides of the Atlantic. And how we meet those challenges and rebuild trust and keep the lines of communication open, I think is incredibly important, particularly for state legislators. So I would love to hear some examples of what you're doing to try to address that.
Thank you so much. And maybe we start the other way around. Do you want to start, Tom?
Yeah, I can do so. Yeah, it's a very good question. And I think on the how, it's already been answered. It's about gaining trust again. And to gain trust, we have to communicate, to talk with the people, to go on events to show them that we are interested in what they are doing, what they need, visit companies, visit communities, getting to know what their needs are. And this on the one hand, but also the reality for myself, it's also often difficult to find people, especially those who are polarizing or who are more likely to vote on the right, very right, or the very left side, because not all of them, or maybe just a few of them, are going to the community meetings, to events or something like this. So what we try is to go to the door of your house and knocking on your door and saying, "Hi, I'm Tom. I'm your legislator in North Rhine-Westphalia. What can I do for you?" And to be honest, even when you are standing directly in front of them, so no question, they didn't invite me, and maybe they got other things to do while me knocking on their door. But also then they are not often likely to discuss their needs or their problems. So I think it's still a very big problem and topic, how to reach those who maybe already left the society, the community, who are surely which are sure they are on their right or correct way, maybe with disinformation in their bubble on social media and something like this. And I think what we can do as politics, and what I try to do on every day at work, to at least make the offer that they are able to get in contact with me, that they see me maybe on the marketplace, maybe in front of their door, and if they want to talk, they are able to do so, because I think over a long time, also politicians of my party and politicians in Germany were more likely being elected, making politics 5 years, and be seen again for the next election. But I think in politics, it's all about being seen and wanting to hear from the people for 5 years long every day.
Thank you so much, Tom. This is extremely helpful. With an eye on the time, I have to ask Dimone and Lydia to be a tiny bit shorter.
Yeah. I think it's a very, very good question. And at least I don't have a solution. I'm a part of the Social Democratic Party, and we lost all the last elections in our country. And one of the things why we lose is that we lost the belief, the people don't believe in us anymore. And so I think conversation is probably one of the big things, staying in dialogue with other people, no matter how far they are, how different are their positions, at least, are from ours. But on the other thing, I think a easier language is also very important, perhaps not too academic. This is for us very important. We have a lot of people which are not academic people, and I think we have to explain a lot, and we have to use an easier language. But I don't have the solution, at least.
Yeah, if it was that easy and if there was a silver bullet, we probably wouldn't be sitting here and discussing social cohesion. And last but not least, Lydia.
Well, again, I want to thank my colleagues. I am back to, we don't have the silver bullet, but what we do know is open dialogue inside of communities where people live, work, and play is very, very important. And coming across as concerned about your fellow constituent starts a real conversation. And it can end in hearing and listening and making bonds where trust is rebuilt.
Thank you so much. Perfect ending words. I also should have said hello to one other participant. Mike Lynch was also with us today, former legislator from Colorado. So we had a full house of state legislators from both sides of the Atlantic and from all sorts of different states in the United States. Being the East Coast, moving to the Midwest, and then also to the West. And we also had two very different states represented on the German side. And what this told us is we might come from different places. We might bring along different experiences. Some of us might speak German, some of us might speak English, but we all share a lot of things. And one thing which I really noticed today, all three of our speakers share a heart, enthusiasm, energy, and a great political will to engage, both in their communities, but also across the Atlantic, to make our world just a little bit better and future-oriented, resilient, and a place we all want to live in. So thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. And the last word belongs to Steve.
Oh, I was not expecting that, but thank you, Stormy. Let me just say thanks again to all three of you. This has been incredibly insightful, I think, for all of us. And I appreciate your taking the time to have this discussion with us. But I also want to say a big thanks to the team that works with Stormy and the team that works with me for putting all of these events together. It's always a delight to partner with Aspen Germany, and I know that it's a team effort to put all of these events together. So a herzlichen Dank, a big thanks to everybody who is involved with all of this.
Thank you so much. Good night and good day.